What happens when the most advanced civilization in the galaxy encounters something that shouldn't exist according to their own laws of physics? For 3,000 years, the Galactic Empire had cataloged every species, every technology, and every possibility in their vast domain. They had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, absorbed their knowledge, and perfected the art of war across the stars. Their quantum-enhanced battle fleets were unstoppable, their predictive algorithms flawless, and their understanding of cosmic warfare absolute. Until the day a single human vessel emerged from the void and changed everything. The Kethmoran Empire had seen primitive species before. They had watched them struggle with basic propulsion, witnessed their clumsy attempts at energy manipulation, and eventually integrated them into the galactic order. Humans were supposed to be just another entry in their endless catalog of lesser beings. But when the detection arrays of the Imperial flagship Eternal Dominion registered impossible readings from a lone human ship, Admiral Vextera realized they might have made their first miscalculation in millennia. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't superior technology or overwhelming numbers. Sometimes it's the audacity to ignore the rules that everyone else considers absolute. And humans had just announced their presence with a vessel that, by every known law of physics and warfare, simply could not exist. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, their numbers, or their weapons. It was their willingness to look at the impossible and say, "Watch this." The bridge of the Imperial flagship Eternal Dominion hummed with the quiet efficiency that had defined Kethmoran naval operations for over 3 millennia. Admiral Vextera stood before the massive tactical display, her 4 arms gracefully manipulating holographic controls as she reviewed the latest intelligence reports from the Outer Rim territories. The bridge itself was a testament to Kethmoran engineering philosophy. Sleek crystalline surfaces that seemed to flow like liquid metal, yet remained harder than any known material. Soft bioluminescent panels provided illumination that was perfectly calibrated to the visual spectrums of a dozen different species that served in the Imperial fleet. Vextera's elongated form towered nearly 3 meters in height, her chitinous exoskeleton bearing the ceremonial markings that denoted her rank as Supreme Fleet Commander of the 3rd Galactic Sector. Her compound eyes, capable of perceiving 17 different electromagnetic spectrums simultaneously, scanned the tactical readouts with the practiced ease of someone who had commanded star fleets for over 2 standard centuries. Behind her, dozens of crew members from various member species of the Empire worked at their stations, their movements coordinated with the precision of a well-rehearsed symphony. The Kethmoran Empire had achieved what many considered impossible: perfect galactic order. Across 47 star systems, encompassing over 200 habitable worlds and countless orbital installations, the Empire maintained absolute control through a combination of overwhelming military superiority and sophisticated predictive algorithms. Every potential threat was identified and neutralized before it could develop into something dangerous. Every technological development was monitored and either incorporated into Imperial doctrine or suppressed if deemed destabilizing. Every species encountered was carefully evaluated, categorized, and either assimilated into the Empire or eliminated if they proved incompatible with galactic peace. It was a system that had worked flawlessly for 3,000 years, and Vextera took considerable pride in her role as one of its guardians. Her tactical record was immaculate. 47 successful campaigns, 0 defeats, and a reputation for crushing rebellions before they could spread beyond their initial worlds. The mere mention of her flagship was often enough to bring entire star systems into compliance. Lieutenant Commander Zeph Kai, a sleek amphibian from the Aquilon system, approached the command dais with the fluid grace characteristic of his species. His translucent skin shifted through subtle color patterns that Vextera's extensive xenobiological training allowed her to interpret as mild concern mixed with curiosity. "Admiral, we're receiving some unusual readings from the long-range sensor arrays," Zeph Kai reported, his voice carrying the melodic quality typical of his people. "The patterns don't match anything in our database." Vextera's attention shifted to her subordinate with the focused intensity of a predator. In her experience, Anything described as unusual by Imperial sensors typically indicated either a malfunction in their equipment or the discovery of a new phenomenon that would require investigation and eventual cataloging. Neither possibility concerned her greatly, but both demanded her immediate attention. "Define unusual, Commander," she said, her own voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked her as a member of the Kethmoran warrior caste. HFY gestured toward the main tactical display, and a section of the hologram shifted to show long-range sensor data. The display showed the familiar configuration of local space, with various objects marked in different colors to indicate their classification: green for Imperial vessels, blue for civilian traffic, yellow for natural phenomena, and red for potential threats. Currently, the screen showed mostly green and blue markers, with a few yellow indicators marking asteroid fields, and a small stellar anomaly that had been cataloged weeks earlier. "We're detecting what appears to be a single vessel at the edge of our sensor range," HFY continued. "The initial readings suggest it's approximately 800 meters in length, which would classify it as a heavy cruiser or small battleship according to Imperial standards. However, the energy signatures are unlike anything we've encountered before." Vexthera moved closer to the display, her compound eyes focusing on the data streams that accompanied the sensor readings. What she saw caused a slight ripple of unease to pass through her normally imperturbable demeanor. The energy signatures were indeed unlike anything in the Imperial database, but more troubling was the way they seemed to shift and fluctuate in patterns that defied conventional physics. "What is the vessel's current vector and velocity?" she asked. "That's where the readings become truly anomalous, Admiral. The vessel appears to be moving at approximately 0.7 light speed, but without any detectable propulsion signature. No fusion torch, no antimatter exhaust, no gravitational manipulation fields. According to our instruments, it's simply moving through space at near relativistic velocity without any visible means of propulsion." The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of various systems. Vexthera felt a sensation she hadn't experienced in decades: genuine confusion. In over 2 centuries of military service, she had encountered virtually every known form of propulsion technology. Some species used fusion rockets, others employed antimatter drives, and the most advanced civilizations had developed various forms of gravitational manipulation. A few had even managed to harness exotic matter for faster-than-light travel. But a vessel moving at 70% of light speed without any detectable propulsion system was simply impossible according to every known law of physics. "Run a full diagnostic on the sensor array," she ordered. "I want to verify that we're not dealing with a malfunction." "Already completed, Admiral," HFY replied. "All systems are functioning within normal parameters. I've also cross-referenced the readings with our secondary arrays and the data from 3 nearby patrol vessels. All sources confirm the same anomalous readings." Vexthera's 4 arms moved in a complex pattern as she brought up additional displays, overlaying various data streams to build a more complete picture of what they were observing. The mysterious vessel continued to maintain its impossible course and velocity, apparently oblivious to the fact that it was violating several fundamental principles of known physics. "What about the vessel's configuration?" she asked. "Can we determine its origin based on its design characteristics?" Another display materialized in the air before her, showing a rough 3-dimensional reconstruction based on the long-range sensor data. The image was frustratingly incomplete due to the distance involved, but certain details were visible. The vessel appeared to have an unusual angular design, with what looked like multiple hull segments arranged in a configuration that seemed both primitive and oddly sophisticated. There were no obvious weapon emplacements visible, though that could simply be due to the limitations of long-range scanning. "The design doesn't match anything in our databases, Admiral. The hull appears to be constructed of standard metallic alloys, but the internal structure is unusual. We're detecting massive power generation capabilities, far exceeding what should be possible for a vessel of this size, but the power distribution patterns are unlike anything we've seen before." Vexthera studied the reconstruction with growing interest. Throughout her career, she had prided herself on her ability to quickly assess and categorize potential threats. It was a skill that had served her well in dozens of campaigns against various rebellious species and criminal organizations. But This vessel defied easy categorization, and that made it potentially dangerous in ways she couldn't yet quantify. "Can we determine the vessel's point of origin?" she asked. HFY manipulated the display to show a larger view of local space, with trajectory lines indicating the mysterious vessel's probable course over the past several hours. Based on its current heading and velocity, the vessel appears to have originated from the Sol system. The mention of Sol caused a subtle shift in the bridge's atmosphere. Several crew members turned to look at their commanders, while others began accessing files on their personal displays. Sol was known to the Empire, of course. It was cataloged as a system containing a single star of moderate size, with several rocky planets and gas giants. The third planet was known to harbor a primitive species called humans, who had only recently achieved basic spaceflight and were still confined to their home system. Vexter accessed the relevant files with a gesture, and the tactical display shifted to show the Empire's current knowledge of humanity. The information was relatively sparse, as the species had been classified as pre-contact and was scheduled for eventual integration into the Imperial structure once they achieved faster-than-light travel capabilities. Current estimates suggested that milestone was still several decades away, possibly longer. According to the files, humans were a bipedal mammalian species with a relatively short lifespan and a strong tendency toward tribal behavior. They had achieved nuclear technology relatively recently and were currently in the early stages of exploring their local space environment. Their largest spacefaring vessels were primitive chemical rockets, capable of carrying small crews to nearby planetary bodies. The idea that they could have constructed something capable of interstellar travel, much less the impossible vessel currently approaching Imperial space, seemed absurd. "Are we certain the trajectory analysis is correct?" Vextera asked. "Triple-checked, Admiral. The vessel's course definitely originates from the Sol system. However, there's another anomaly. Based on its current velocity and the distance traveled, the vessel should have been in transit for approximately 18 months. But our monitoring stations in that sector show no evidence of any launch from the Sol system during that time frame." The situation was becoming more intriguing by the moment. Vextera found herself facing a genuine mystery, something she hadn't experienced in decades of military service. A vessel that shouldn't exist, traveling in a manner that was physically impossible, from a species that lacked the technology to build anything even remotely capable of interstellar travel. "What is the vessel's current heading?" she asked. HFY highlighted a section of the display showing projected course vectors. "If it maintains its current trajectory, it will pass through the outer edge of the Kepler 442 system in approximately 6 hours. That system contains one of our primary manufacturing worlds and serves as a hub for civilian shipping in this sector." The tactical implications were immediately apparent to Vextera. Regardless of the vessel's apparent impossibilities, it was approaching a major Imperial installation. Protocol demanded that all unidentified vessels be intercepted and their intentions determined before they could reach populated systems. The fact that this particular vessel appeared to violate known physics simply made the interception more urgent. "Signal the Second Fleet to alter course and intercept," she ordered. "I want a full squadron positioned to greet our mysterious visitors. Maintain defensive formations, but do not take any aggressive actions until we determine what we're dealing with." "Yes, Admiral. Should I also alert High Command about the anomalous readings?" Vextera considered the question carefully. High Command had very specific protocols for dealing with unusual situations, but those protocols assumed that unusual situations would still operate within the bounds of known physics. She wasn't entirely certain how to categorize a vessel that appeared to ignore fundamental laws of the universe. Not yet, she decided. Let's gather more data before we start filing reports about impossible starships. I have a feeling this situation is going to require a more personal touch. As the bridge crew began implementing her orders, Vex_Thera continued to study the sensor readings. Somewhere in the depths of her analytical mind, she felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't experienced in many years: doubt. The Kethmoran Empire had built its dominance on the foundation of superior knowledge and technology. They understood the universe in ways that younger species could barely comprehend, and that understanding had allowed them to predict and control virtually every significant event in their sphere of influence. But this human vessel, if that's truly what it was, represented something that shouldn't be possible according to their understanding of the universe. And if their understanding was incomplete, if there were aspects of physics or technology that had escaped their notice despite 3 millennia of scientific advancement, then perhaps their dominance wasn't as absolute as they had believed. The thought was both disturbing and oddly exhilarating. For a warrior who had spent centuries fighting battles with predetermined outcomes, the possibility of encountering something genuinely unpredictable was almost refreshing. As the Eternal Dominion altered course to intercept the mysterious vessel, Vextera found herself looking forward to making contact with humanity for the first time. She had no way of knowing that the next few hours would fundamentally change her understanding of warfare, physics, and the nature of intelligence itself. The human vessel approaching Imperial space wasn't just impossible according to Kethmoran science. It was the harbinger of a revolution that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The interception occurred exactly as Vextera had calculated, though nothing else about the encounter proceeded according to established Imperial protocol. 6 hours after the initial detection, a full squadron of Kethmoran heavy cruisers had positioned themselves in a standard defensive formation along the mysterious vessel's projected course. The formation was designed to present an impressive display of Imperial power while maintaining enough tactical flexibility to respond to any aggressive action. As the human vessel approached, the detailed sensor readings only deepened the mystery surrounding its existence. The ship appeared to be a sleek, angular construction approximately 800 meters in length, with a distinctive design that seemed to blend aesthetic considerations with functional requirements in ways that Imperial engineers found puzzling. The hull was composed of various metallic alloys that registered as primitive by Kethmoran standards, yet the internal power signatures continued to indicate energy generation capabilities that should have been impossible for such materials. Admiral Vextera observed the approach from the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, her compound eyes analyzing multiple data streams simultaneously. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, but she could sense the underlying tension that came from encountering something that defied their fundamental understanding of the universe. "Admiral, the vessel is reducing velocity," reported Commander Zefkai. "It appears to be responding to our presence." This was the first conventional behavior the human ship had displayed since its detection, and Vextera found it oddly reassuring. Perhaps the vessel's operators, whoever they were, possessed enough sense to recognize the significance of encountering an Imperial fleet. The deceleration also provided their sensors with better resolution, allowing them to gather more detailed information about the ship's configuration. What they discovered was even more perplexing than the vessel's impossible propulsion system. The ship's internal structure revealed massive computational systems that appear to be based on principles completely unknown to Imperial science. There were what appeared to be weapons systems, but they operated on energy manipulation principles that didn't match anything in the Kethmoran database. Most disturbing of all, the ship's crew appeared to number only 12 individuals. 12 beings operating a vessel that should have required a crew of several hundred according to Imperial standards. Either these humans possessed automation capabilities far in advance of anything the Empire had achieved, or they were operating systems that functioned according to principles that Imperial engineers didn't understand. Range to target vessel, Vextera inquired. 50,000 kilometers and closing, Admiral. The vessel has reduced to approximately 1/10 light speed and appears to be maintaining a steady approach vector. Any response to our standard greeting protocols? Negative, Admiral. We've transmitted the standard first contact package in 17 different languages and mathematical formats. No response on any channel. This was not particularly unusual in Vextera's experience. Many primitive species lacked the technological sophistication to decode Imperial communication protocols immediately. However, the fact that they had managed to construct an interstellar vessel while apparently lacking basic communication technology was another puzzling contradiction. "Reduce fleet velocity to match their approach," she ordered. "I want to maintain a parallel course until we can establish some form of communication." The Imperial squadron gracefully adjusted its formation, the massive warships moving with a fluid precision that characterized Kethmoran fleet operations. Each vessel in the formation was individually capable of sterilizing a planetary surface, and together they represented enough firepower to devastate entire star systems. Yet Vexthera found herself approaching the small human vessel with an unusual degree of caution. Something about the ship's behavior suggested intelligence and purpose, but not the kind of desperate aggression that the Empire typically encountered from primitive species attempting to punch above their weight class. The vessel continued its approach with what seemed like casual confidence, as though its operators were completely unaware that they were facing a force capable of obliterating their ship in microseconds. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission," Zefkai announced suddenly. "From a human vessel?" "Confirmed. The transmission is being sent on multiple electromagnetic frequencies, and it appears to include both audio and visual components. The format is unlike anything in our database, but our communications array believes it can decode the signal." Vexthera felt a surge of anticipation. First contact with a new species was always significant, but this particular encounter promised to be especially interesting given the mysterious nature of the human vessel. "Put it through." The main display shimmered and reconfigured itself to show a translated version of the incoming transmission. After a few moments of static and distortion, an image began to resolve itself on the screen. What appeared was the face of a bipedal mammalian being that matched the physical descriptions in the Empire's files on humanity. The being appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair and lines around its eyes that suggested considerable experience. It was wearing what looked like a practical uniform of some kind, though the design was unlike anything in the Imperial database. Most notably, the being's expression seemed remarkably calm and confident, showing none of the fear or awe that typically characterized first contact scenarios. When the being spoke, the Imperial translation systems worked frantically to decode the alien language and convert it into something the bridge crew could understand. The voice that emerged was clear and measured, with an undertone of humor that Vexthera found oddly unsettling. "Greetings to the vessels of the Kethmoran Empire. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth ship Defiance. We appreciate your welcoming committee, though it seems a bit excessive for a simple diplomatic mission." The casual tone of the transmission sent ripples of surprise through the bridge crew. Most species, upon encountering an Imperial fleet for the first time, responded with either aggressive posturing or obvious fear. This human female seemed to be treating the encounter as though it were a routine social interaction. More troubling was her knowledge of Kethmoran identity. According to Imperial records, humanity was a pre-contact species with no knowledge of galactic civilization. Yet this Captain Chun had correctly identified them as members of the Kethmoran Empire, suggesting that human intelligence capabilities were significantly more advanced than their official classification indicated. Vexthera gestured for the communications officer to open a return channel. "Captain Chun, I am Admiral Vexthera of the Imperial Fleet. Your vessel has been observed traveling through space using propulsion technology that appears to violate several fundamental laws of physics. We require an explanation of your presence in Imperial space and the nature of your technology." The response came back almost immediately, suggesting that the human ship possessed communication systems with minimal transmission delay despite the distance involved. Captain Chen's expression shifted to what appeared to be amusement, an emotional display that Vexthera found difficult to interpret. "Admiral, I appreciate your curiosity about our propulsion system, but I'm afraid the technical details are classified. As for our presence in your space, we're here on a diplomatic mission. Earth's government has been monitoring galactic communications for some time now, and we felt it was appropriate to establish formal contact." Another impossibility added to an already growing list. "Captain Chun, according to our records, your species has not achieved faster-than-light travel capability. Yet your vessel appears to have crossed interstellar distances in a time frame that suggests advanced propulsion technology. How do you explain this discrepancy?" The human captain's expression became more serious, though the underlying confidence remained unchanged. "Admiral, with all due respect, your records may be somewhat outdated. Humanity has achieved several technological breakthroughs in recent years that have significantly expanded our capabilities. We're here today to discuss how our two civilizations might interact moving forward. Vextera felt her tactical instincts beginning to activate. Throughout her career, she had learned to recognize when she was being misdirected or when important information was being withheld. Captain Chin's responses were polite but evasive, providing no real answers about the nature of human technology or capabilities. More concerning was the humans' apparent assumption that the Empire would be interested in diplomatic relations with a species that was, by all Imperial standards, still primitive. Captain, before any diplomatic discussions can proceed, Imperial protocol requires that we conduct a full inspection of your vessel to assess its technology and ensure it poses no threat to Imperial security. Please prepare to receive a boarding party. For the first time since the communication had begun, Captain Chin's expression showed something other than calm confidence. A brief flash of what might have been irritation crossed her features before being replaced by a more diplomatic mask. Admiral, I'm afraid that won't be possible. The Defiance contains certain classified technologies that cannot be shared with non-allied species at this time. However, I'm authorized to invite a small delegation aboard our ship to discuss potential cooperation between our civilizations. The audacity of the statement left the bridge crew in stunned silence. A representative of a primitive, pre-contact species was refusing an Imperial inspection order while simultaneously offering to host Imperial personnel aboard their vessel. It was a complete reversal of the normal power dynamic that characterized first contact scenarios, and Vextera found herself genuinely uncertain how to respond. Under normal circumstances, refusal to comply with an Imperial inspection would result in the immediate seizure or destruction of a non-compliant vessel. However, the mysterious nature of human technology gave her pause. If they possessed capabilities that the Empire didn't understand, precipitating a conflict without better intelligence could prove disastrous. Captain Shun, you must understand that the Kethmoran Empire has specific protocols for dealing with unknown technologies. Your refusal to permit inspection puts us in a difficult position. I understand your concerns, Admiral. However, humanity also has protocols regarding the protection of sensitive technology. Perhaps we can find a middle ground that serves both our interests. Vextera considered her options carefully. The safe course would be to withdraw the fleet to a respectful distance and contact High Command for instructions on how to proceed. However, her tactical intuition suggested that this might be her only opportunity to gather intelligence about human capabilities before the situation escalated beyond diplomatic resolution. Very well, Captain Shun. I will accept your invitation to come aboard your vessel, but only under specific conditions. I will bring a small diplomatic team, and our ships will maintain their current positions. Any aggressive action toward my personnel will result in the immediate destruction of your vessel. Captain Chin's confident smile returned, though Vextera thought she detected a hint of something else in the human's expression. Of course, Admiral. We'll prepare to receive your delegation. I think you'll find our conversation quite enlightening. As the communication link closed, Vextera found herself facing a decision that could have far-reaching consequences for the Empire. She was about to board a vessel that represented technology beyond their understanding, operated by a species that had somehow achieved interstellar travel while remaining officially classified as primitive. Every tactical instinct she possessed warned her that she was walking into a situation that could spiral rapidly out of control. If humanity possessed technology that could challenge Imperial supremacy, she needed to understand its nature and limitations. And if Captain Shun was simply an elaborate bluff backed by primitive technology dressed up to appear more advanced than it really was, then a personal inspection would reveal the deception quickly enough. Either way, the next few hours would determine whether humanity represented a potential ally, a manageable threat, or something entirely outside the Empire's experience. As she prepared to transfer to the human vessel, Vextera couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to cross a threshold that would fundamentally change her understanding of galactic civilization. The shuttle bay of the Defiance was unlike anything in Vextera's extensive experience with alien architecture and design philosophy. As her diplomatic shuttle settled onto the landing platform, she observed through the transparent viewing ports that the human vessel's interior seemed to blend practical functionality with an aesthetic sensibility that was both alien and oddly appealing. The bay itself was larger than should have been possible given the ship's external dimensions, suggesting either sophisticated spatial compression technology or internal design principles that defied conventional engineering. Admiral Vexthera had selected her diplomatic team with considerable care. Accompanying her were Commander Zefkai for his expertise in xenobiology and first contact protocols, Senior Technician Mordun from the Engineering Corps to assess human technology, and Lieutenant Kessera from Imperial Intelligence to evaluate potential security threats. Each member of the team carried full sensor suites disguised as diplomatic equipment, allowing them to gather comprehensive data about human capabilities while maintaining the pretense of a peaceful diplomatic exchange. As the shuttle's boarding ramp extended, Vexthera activated her personal force field generators and checked her sidearms power levels. While she had agreed to this meeting in the spirit of diplomatic exploration, she was far too experienced to enter a potentially hostile environment without adequate precautions. The fact that human technology appeared to operate outside known physical laws only reinforced her conviction that maximum caution was warranted. The first human they encountered was clearly a member of the ship's crew, though his uniform and equipment were unlike anything in the Imperial database. He appeared to be young by human standards, with dark hair and alert eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the Ketharan delegation as they disembarked. Most notably, he showed no signs of intimidation or awe despite being in the presence of representatives from the galaxy's most powerful military force. "Welcome aboard the Defiance," the human said, his voice carrying a confidence that seemed characteristic of his species. "I am Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez. Captain Chun is waiting for you in the conference room." As they followed Rodriguez through the ship's corridors, Vexthera's sensory equipment began gathering data about the vessel's internal configuration. What they discovered was even more remarkable than the external anomalies they had observed. The ship's internal structure revealed technology that seemed to operate on principles completely unknown to Imperial science. Power conduits carried energy in forms that didn't correspond to any known type of electromagnetic radiation. Computer systems processed information using methods that appeared to violate basic principles of quantum mechanics. Most disturbing of all, the ship's artificial gravity system showed no detectable gravitational manipulation fields, yet functioned flawlessly throughout the vessel. Senior Technician Mordun, whose expertise in engineering systems was considered among the finest in the Imperial fleet, was practically vibrating with confusion as his sensors fed him impossible readings. Through their private communication link, he transmitted a continuous stream of increasingly puzzled observations to the rest of the team. "Admiral, the power distribution systems in this vessel appear to be channeling energy through crystalline matrices that shouldn't be able to conduct electricity. The computer networks are processing information at rates that would require quantum processing capabilities far beyond anything we've achieved. Yet I can detect no quantum resonance fields. And the gravitational systems, there are no gravitational systems. Somehow, they're generating artificial gravity without manipulating space-time." The corridors themselves reflected the same blend of functionality and unexpected aesthetics that characterized the shuttle bay. The walls were constructed of materials that appear to be standard metallic alloys, yet they seemed to have a subtle, luminescent quality that provided gentle illumination without any visible light sources. The floor surfaces provided perfect traction despite appearing to be composed of a smooth, polished material. Everything about the ship's design suggested a level of technological sophistication that simply shouldn't exist according to Imperial understanding of human capabilities. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez led them through a series of corridors that seemed to follow no logical pattern according to conventional ship design principles. At one point, they passed through what appeared to be a recreational area where several human crew members were engaged in various activities. The crew members looked up as the delegation passed, showing curiosity and interest, but none of the fear or submissive behavior that typically characterized interactions between the Empire and lesser species. One detail that particularly struck Vexthera was the apparent casualness with which the human crew treated the presence of Imperial representatives aboard their vessel. In her experience, most primitive species reacted to Imperial contact with either aggressive hostility or overwhelming awe. These humans seemed to treat their visitors as interesting guests rather than potential conquerors, suggesting either remarkable ignorance of Imperial capabilities or confidence in their own defensive systems. Commander Zefkai, whose expertise in xenobiology had made him invaluable during dozens of first-contact scenarios, was equally puzzled by human behavior. Through their communication link, he shared his observations with growing bewilderment. Admiral, the psychological profiles we're observing don't match any known pattern for pre-contact species. These beings show no signs of technological inferiority complex, no defensive aggression, and no apparent recognition of the power differential between their civilization and ours. Either they're remarkably sophisticated actors, or they genuinely believe they can interact with the Empire's equals. The conference room they eventually reached was a study in contrast that seemed to embody human design philosophy. The table appeared to be constructed of some kind of natural wood, polished to a rich gleam that spoke of careful craftsmanship and aesthetic appreciation. The chairs were clearly designed to accommodate multiple species, with adjustable configurations that suggested the humans had given considerable thought to hosting non-human visitors. The walls displayed what appeared to be artistic representations of various planetary landscapes, though several depicted worlds that didn't appear in any Imperial catalog. Captain Chun rose to greet them as they entered, and Vextera found herself reassessing her initial impression of the human commander. While Chun had appeared confident and composed during their ship-to-ship communication, seeing her in person revealed additional details that suggested considerable experience and competence. Her movements were economical and precise. Her attention seemed to focus immediately on the most important elements of any situation, and her overall bearing suggested someone accustomed to command responsibility. Admiral Vextera, welcome to the Defiance, Chun said, gesturing for the delegation to take seats around the conference table. I hope you'll find our conversation productive. As they settled into their seats, Vextera noted that the human captain had positioned herself with her back to one of the artistic displays, probably to avoid any distraction from her own expressions while maintaining visual contact with all members of the Kethmoran delegation. It was a subtle but professional touch that suggested training in diplomatic protocol. Captain Chun, before we begin any substantive discussions, I must express my curiosity about your vessel's capabilities. Our sensors are detecting technology that appears to operate outside the boundaries of known physics. I find it difficult to believe that such capabilities could be developed by a species that was classified as pre-contact only months ago. Captain Chin's expression became slightly more serious, though the underlying confidence remained unchanged. Admiral, I understand your confusion. Humanity has indeed achieved several technological breakthroughs that may seem surprising given your previous assessment of our capabilities. However, I hope you'll understand that I can't provide detailed technical information about our systems. What I can tell you is that we've developed these capabilities through our own research and innovation. Senior Technician Mordun leaned forward slightly, his natural curiosity overcoming diplomatic protocol. Captain, forgive my directness, but the technologies we're observing aboard your vessel appear to contradict several fundamental laws of physics. Could you at least provide some insight into the theoretical frameworks that made such developments possible? Chun smiled, an expression that Vextera was beginning to recognize as characteristic of human responses to difficult questions. Technician, I appreciate your professional interest. What I can tell you is that humanity has always had a tendency to approach scientific problems from unconventional angles. Sometimes what appears impossible is simply a matter of looking at familiar problems from unfamiliar perspectives. The answer was diplomatic, but ultimately evasive, providing no real information about human technological capabilities. Vextera decided to try a more direct approach. Captain Chun, you mentioned that Earth's government has been monitoring galactic communications. This suggests surveillance capabilities that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of human technology. How long has humanity been aware of galactic civilization? For the first time since the conversation had begun, Captain Shin hesitated slightly before responding. It was a brief pause, lasting perhaps a second, but it suggested that this particular question touched on information that the human captain considered sensitive. Admiral, humanity became aware of galactic civilization approximately 5 years ago. Initially, we chose to observe and learn before making contact, which allowed us to develop the necessary technologies and diplomatic frameworks for productive interaction with other species. The time frame was puzzling. 5 years was an impossibly short period for a primitive species to develop interstellar travel capabilities, much less the advanced technologies that the Defiance appeared to possess. Either humanity had been concealing their technological development for much longer than they claimed, or they had achieved advancement at a rate that defied every known model of technological evolution. Lieutenant Kisura, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. As an intelligence specialist, her training focused on identifying deception and evaluating potential threats. Captain Chun, if humanity has been monitoring galactic communications for 5 years, then you must be aware of Imperial capabilities and policies. You understand that the Kethmoran Empire maintains galactic peace through superior military force, and that non-compliance with Imperial directives typically results in unpleasant consequences. The implied threat was subtle but unmistakable, and Vexteral watched carefully for Captain Chen's reaction. Most primitive species, when confronted with the reality of Imperial power, showed clear signs of intimidation or defensive aggression. Chen's response was neither. Lieutenant, I'm quite aware of Imperial policies and capabilities. I'm also aware that the Empire generally prefers diplomatic solutions when dealing with species that demonstrate technological sophistication and peaceful intentions. Humanity falls into both categories. The confidence was remarkable, but it raised obvious questions about the basis for such assurance. Vexterod decided to test the limits of human knowledge about Imperial capabilities. Captain, our records indicate that your home system contains no significant defensive installations or military vessels capable of resisting Imperial intervention. If diplomatic solutions prove unsatisfactory, what exactly prevents the Empire from simply taking what we need to understand your technology? Chen's smile became slightly broader, and for the first time, Vexterod detected what might have been amusement in the human's expression. Admiral, that's an excellent question. Perhaps I should show you something that might help clarify humanity's position in this discussion. The human captain rose from her seat and moved to what appeared to be a control interface built into the conference room wall. As she began manipulating the controls, the artistic displays around the room shifted and reconfigured themselves into what was obviously a tactical representation of local space. What appeared on the displays caused every member of the Kethmoran delegation to stiffen in shock. The tactical representation showed not only the current positions of Imperial fleet elements, but also detailed information about their capabilities, crew complements, and tactical readiness. More disturbing still, the display indicated the presence of numerous additional human vessels positioned throughout the local area. As you can see, Admiral, the Defiance isn't traveling alone, Chun said, her voice carrying the same casual confidence she had maintained throughout their conversation. Humanity has been preparing for this contact for some time, and we wanted to ensure that our first meeting proceeded smoothly. Vexeros stared at the display in growing alarm. According to the tactical representation, there were over a dozen human vessels positioned in stealth configurations around the Imperial fleet. Ships that had somehow avoided detection by the most advanced sensor systems in galactic civilization, yet were apparently capable of observing and analyzing Imperial forces with remarkable precision. The implications were staggering. If humanity possessed both advanced stealth technology and the ability to deploy multiple interstellar vessels without detection, then their technological capabilities were far beyond anything the Empire had imagined. More than that, their strategic planning suggested a level of sophistication that contradicted every assumption about primitive species behavior. Captain, Vexteros said, her voice carefully controlled despite the shock of the revelation. This information suggests that humanity has been preparing for potential conflict with the Empire. That seems inconsistent with your stated desire for diplomatic relations. Chun returned to her seat with the same casual movement she had displayed throughout their meeting. Admiral, preparing for multiple contingencies isn't inconsistent with preferring diplomatic solutions. Humanity has studied Imperial history extensively, and we understand that strength tends to facilitate better diplomatic outcomes than weakness. The statement was both logical and profoundly unsettling. It suggested that humanity had not only achieved advanced technology, but had also developed sophisticated strategic thinking about interacting with galactic civilization. They had prepared for this contact with the same methodical planning that the Empire typically employed when incorporating new species, but with the added advantage of observing Imperial behavior without revealing their own capabilities. As Vextheros studied the tactical display, she realized that she was facing a situation unlike any she had encountered in her centuries of military service. Humanity appeared to possess technological capabilities that the Empire didn't understand, strategic planning that rivaled Imperial doctrine, and confidence that suggested they believed they could interact with galactic civilization as equals rather than subjects. For the first time in decades, Admiral Vexthera found herself uncertain about the outcome of a potential military encounter. The question that remained was whether humanity's confidence was justified, or whether they had simply managed to create an impressive illusion of capability while remaining fundamentally vulnerable to Imperial power. Either way, the galaxy was about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force encountered an immovable object. And Vexthera had the uncomfortable feeling that the Empire might not emerge from that encounter unchanged. The tension in the conference room had shifted dramatically since Captain Chin's revelation about the hidden human fleet. Admiral Vexthera found herself reassessing everything she thought she understood about this first contact scenario. The casual confidence that had initially seemed like primitive bravado now appeared to be backed by genuine capability, though the extent of that capability remained unclear. Captain Chun, Vexthera said, her voice carrying the measured tone she reserved for potentially dangerous situations. You've made it clear that humanity is more prepared for this encounter than our intelligence suggested. However, technological surprise only provides temporary advantage. The Empire has resources that extend far beyond what you see in this immediate area. Shin nodded thoughtfully, as though she had expected this line of reasoning. You're absolutely correct, Admiral. The Empire commands vast resources and has demonstrated remarkable effectiveness in maintaining galactic stability for 3 millennia. That's actually why we wanted to establish contact in a controlled manner rather than waiting for the Empire to discover our capabilities through other means. Lieutenant Kessera leaned forward, her intelligence training focusing on the implications of Chen's statement. Are you suggesting that humanity has capabilities the Empire would consider threatening enough to warrant a military response? That's an interesting question, Lieutenant. I think the answer depends largely on how we choose to proceed from this point forward. Humanity has no desire for conflict with the Empire, but we also can't allow our technological development to be restricted by external limitations. The statement was diplomatically phrased, but its implications were clear. Humanity was essentially declaring that they would not submit to Imperial authority regarding their technological development, which placed them in direct opposition to fundamental Imperial doctrine. Every species that had achieved advanced technology had either submitted to Imperial oversight or been forcibly brought into compliance. The idea that a newly contacted species would simply refuse to acknowledge Imperial authority was unprecedented. Senior Technician Mordun, who had been studying the tactical displays with growing bewilderment, finally spoke up. Captain, our sensors indicate that your vessels are somehow masking their presence from our detection systems. Could you provide some insight into how such capabilities were developed? Chun smiled, and Vexthera noticed that the expression seemed genuinely amused rather than diplomatically polite. Technician, I'm afraid the technical details are classified, but I can tell you that human scientists have always been fascinated by the intersection of theoretical physics and practical engineering. Sometimes, approaching familiar problems from completely different directions yields unexpected results. But the energy requirements alone for such stealth systems should be detectable. Mordun persisted. We're not observing any power signatures that would suggest active concealment technology. That's because you're looking for concealment technology that operates according to principles you understand. Human stealth systems work somewhat differently. The exchange was both frustrating and illuminating. Captain Chun was providing just enough information to demonstrate that human technology operated outside Imperial understanding while carefully avoiding any details that might allow Imperial scientists to develop countermeasures. It was a sophisticated approach to information management that suggested considerable experience with technological intelligence gathering. Vexthera decided to change tactics. Rather than continuing to probe for technical information that Chun was obviously prepared to withhold, she would focus on understanding human intentions and capabilities on a strategic level. Captain, assuming that humanity possesses the advanced capabilities you've suggested, what exactly does Earth's government hope to achieve through this contact? What are your long-term objectives regarding interaction with galactic civilization? For the first time during their conversation, Chen's expression became more serious, losing some of the casual amusement she had displayed when discussing technical matters. Admiral, humanity's primary objective is quite simple. We want to take our place in galactic civilization as an independent, sovereign species. We're not interested in conquest or domination, but we're also not willing to accept subordinate status. The statement was remarkable for its directness. Most primitive species, when first contacted by the Empire, either reacted with aggressive hostility or immediately sought protection through integration into imperial structure. The idea that a species would calmly declare their intention to remain independent while acknowledging the existence of superior galactic powers suggested a level of strategic thinking that was both impressive and potentially dangerous. Captain, Lieutenant Kisra interjected, you must understand that the Empire's authority isn't simply a matter of choice. Galactic stability requires coordination and oversight of technological development. Independent species operating without proper supervision have historically created significant problems. Understand the Empire's perspective, Lieutenant. However, humanity has studied galactic history extensively, and we've observed that Imperial oversight often involves restrictions on technological and cultural development that we find unacceptable. We prefer to chart our own course. Commander Zeph Kai, who had been observing the human captain's behavior patterns throughout the conversation, finally contributed his professional assessment. Captain Shun, your species' confidence in its ability to remain independent suggests either remarkable technological capabilities or significant misunderstanding of Imperial power. Would you be willing to provide a demonstration that might help us evaluate which interpretation is more accurate? Chen's amused expression returned, and she glanced around the conference table as though considering the request carefully. That's an interesting suggestion, Commander. I suppose a limited demonstration might help clarify humanity's position. What did you have in mind? Something that would allow us to assess your defensive capabilities without compromising sensitive technical information. Perhaps your vessels could demonstrate their ability to avoid Imperial sensor detection in a more controlled manner. Captain Chen stood and moved back to the control interface, manipulating the tactical display to show a broader view of local space. Actually, I think I can arrange something more informative than a stealth demonstration. Computer, initiate Protocol 7. The response was immediate and utterly shocking. The tactical display suddenly revealed the presence of hundreds of human vessels positioned throughout the local star system. Ships that had somehow avoided detection not only by the Imperial fleet in the immediate area, but by the extensive sensor networks that monitored every approach to Imperial space. This is impossible, Mordun whispered, his professional composure finally cracking as he watched the sensor readings that accompanied the visual display. Those acceleration curves would generate forces sufficient to liquefy any known biological material. The directional changes violate conservation of momentum, and faster-than-light travel without dimensional manipulation is theoretically impossible according to every known model of physics. Captain Chun returned to her seat, her expression showing satisfaction with the impact her demonstration was having on the Imperial delegation. Technician, I appreciate your professional perspective, but I think you might be making assumptions about the limitations of biological systems and the fundamental nature of physics that may not apply to human technology. The implications of what they were observing began to sink in for Vexthera. If humanity had truly developed propulsion systems that could operate outside the known laws of physics, then every Imperial assumption about technological limitations was fundamentally flawed. More than that, if human crews could survive acceleration forces that should be lethal, then either their physical augmentation capabilities were beyond Imperial understanding, or they had developed some form of inertial compensation technology that the Empire had never imagined possible. Captain, Vexthera said, her voice carefully controlled despite the shock of what she was witnessing. These capabilities suggest technological development that would typically require thousands of years of advancement. How did humanity achieve such capabilities in the brief period since your species achieved spaceflight? Admiral, I think you may be underestimating human innovative capacity. We've always had a talent for finding unconventional solutions to complex problems. Sometimes, the most significant breakthroughs come from questioning fundamental assumptions that other species take for granted. The demonstration continued for several more minutes, with human vessels performing maneuvers that challenged every assumption about space combat that Vexthera had developed over her centuries of military experience. Ships appeared and disappeared at will, suggesting stealth technology that was essentially perfect. Others demonstrated apparent immunity to gravitational effects, moving through space as though mass and acceleration were optional considerations. Most disturbing of all, several vessels appeared to be operating in multiple locations simultaneously, suggesting either advanced automation capabilities or transportation technology that bordered on the supernatural. Finally, Captain Chun gestured toward the display, and the human fleet began returning to their concealed positions. Within minutes, the tactical representation returned to its original state, showing only the Defiance and the Imperial Squadron. As you can see, Chun said, her voice maintaining the same casual confidence she had displayed throughout their meeting, humanity is quite capable of defending ourselves if necessary. However, we much prefer diplomatic solutions to mutual problems. The silence in the conference room stretched for several seconds as the Imperial delegation processed what they had witnessed. Finally, Vexthera found her voice. Captain Chun, the capabilities you've demonstrated are beyond Imperial understanding of technological possibility. If humanity possesses such advanced systems, why have you remained hidden until now? And why choose to reveal yourselves at this particular time? Those are excellent questions, Admiral. The simple answer is that we wanted to complete our technological development before making contact with galactic civilization. We understood that first impressions tend to establish the terms of ongoing relationships, and we wanted to ensure that those terms would be appropriate for our long-term objectives. Lieutenant Kessera leaned back in her chair, her intelligence training trying to process the strategic implications of human capabilities. Captain, you must realize that revealing such advanced technology to the Empire creates certain obligations. High Command will expect detailed information about human capabilities and intentions. Lieutenant, I understand Imperial concerns about technological oversight. However, humanity operates under different assumptions about the relationship between technological development and political independence. We're quite willing to share certain technologies with friendly species, but we can't accept external authority over our research and development activities. The conversation had reached a critical juncture. Captain Chun was essentially informing the Empire that humanity would not submit to the technological oversight that was a fundamental requirement of Imperial membership. At the same time, she had demonstrated capabilities that suggested humanity might actually be able to enforce their independence regardless of Imperial preferences. For Admiral Vexthera, the situation represented a completely unprecedented challenge. Throughout her career, she had dealt with species that were either technologically inferior and thus manageable, or technologically superior but limited in scope and thus containable. Humanity appeared to be neither. They possessed technological capabilities that rivaled or exceeded Imperial systems, but they also demonstrated strategic thinking that suggested they understood the broader implications of galactic politics. Captain Chun, Vexthera said finally, what you're proposing is essentially a fundamental change in the relationship between the Empire and independent species. The current system has maintained galactic stability for 3 millennia. Admiral, I'm not suggesting that the current system should be changed for everyone. What I'm suggesting is that humanity represents a special case that might require innovative diplomatic approaches. We're not interested in destabilizing galactic civilization, but we're also not willing to sacrifice our independence for the sake of administrative convenience. As the meeting continued, Vexthera realized that she was witnessing something that might be historically significant. For the first time in Imperial history, they were encountering a species that possessed both the technological capability and the strategic sophistication to negotiate with the Empire from a position of genuine equality. The question that remained was whether the Empire could adapt to this new reality, or whether humanity's emergence would trigger the first serious challenge to Kethmoran dominance in thousands of years. Either way, the galaxy was about to enter a new phase of political and technological evolution, and Vextera suspected that the outcome would reshape the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. 3 months after the initial contact with the Defiance, Admiral Vextera stood in the high command chambers on Kethmoran Prime, delivering what would undoubtedly be remembered as one of the most significant briefings in Imperial history. The circular chamber, with its soaring crystalline walls and ambient lighting that shifted through subtle spectrum changes, had witnessed the planning of countless military campaigns and the integration of dozens of species into the Imperial structure. Today, however, it was serving as the venue for a discussion that would fundamentally alter the Empire's understanding of galactic civilization. The assembled High Command represented the finest military and political minds that Kethmoran society had produced over 3 millennia. Fleet Admiral Thescaron, whose strategic brilliance had secured Imperial dominance in 7 separate galactic sectors, sat at the head of the curved table that dominated the chamber's center. Around him were arranged the sector commanders, intelligence chiefs, and senior administrators who collectively governed an empire spanning nearly 50 star systems and countless billions of sentient beings. What made this briefing extraordinary was not just the presence of such distinguished leadership, but the complete absence of the confident certainty that typically characterized high command discussions. For the first time in recorded Imperial history, the leadership was confronting a situation that didn't fit into their established frameworks for understanding galactic politics and military strategy. Admiral Vextera, Fleet Admiral Thescaron said, his voice carrying the harmonic resonance that marked him as a member of the highest Kethmoran caste. Your initial reports regarding human capabilities have been studied extensively by our best scientific minds. The consensus appears to be that either our fundamental understanding of physics is incomplete, or humanity has somehow achieved technological capabilities that shouldn't be possible according to known scientific principles. Vextera activated the holographic display system that dominated the center of the chamber, and the space above the conference table filled with tactical representations of the encounters between Imperial forces and human vessels over the past 3 months. The data was both comprehensive and deeply troubling. Fleet Admiral, the situation has continued to develop since our initial contact. Humanity has established diplomatic missions in 17 star systems throughout Imperial space, each protected by vessels that demonstrate the same impossible technological capabilities we observed during the first encounter. More significantly, they've begun offering technological assistance to some of our member species. The implications of that statement sent ripples of concern through the assembled leadership. Imperial stability depended heavily on maintaining technological superiority over member species, ensuring that no single world or sector could challenge central authority. If humanity was sharing advanced technology with Imperial subjects, the carefully maintained balance of power that had preserved galactic peace for thousands of years could be fundamentally disrupted. Intelligence Director Kolthara, whose network of operatives and analysts provided the Empire with comprehensive information about potential threats throughout the galaxy, leaned forward in her seat. What specific technologies are they sharing? And with which species? Vextera manipulated the holographic display to show detailed reports from various Imperial worlds. They've provided improved agricultural systems to the farming worlds in the Centauri sector, resulting in crop yields that exceed anything we've achieved with Imperial technology. They've shared medical advances with the hospital worlds that have eliminated several diseases we considered incurable. Most concerning, they've begun offering propulsion upgrades to member species that would allow independent interstellar travel without Imperial oversight. The chamber fell silent as the assembled leadership processed the strategic implications of human actions. The Empire had always maintained control partly through technological dependence, ensuring that member species required Imperial infrastructure and expertise for advanced capabilities. If humanity was providing member species with the tools for technological independence, the entire foundation of Imperial authority could be undermined. Fleet Admiral Thescaron's compound eyes shifted through several color phases, indicating deep thought and growing concern. Have any member species accepted these technological offerings? Several have, Fleet Admiral. The agricultural worlds were the first to accept human assistance, partly because food production is seen as a humanitarian issue rather than a military concern. However, 3 industrial worlds in the outer sectors have also begun implementing human manufacturing technologies that appear to violate several imperial regulations regarding advanced automation. Senior strategic analyst Vec Moran, whose predictive algorithms had successfully anticipated political developments throughout the empire for over a century, activated his personal data interface and began cross-referencing human activities with historical patterns of technological disruption. Admiral Vextera, based on historical precedent, technological gifts to member species typically precede either incorporation attempts or preparation for military conflict. Have we detected any evidence of human military buildup that might suggest aggressive intentions? Vextera shifted the display to show long-range sensor data from throughout Imperial space. That's where the situation becomes even more complex, analyst. We haven't detected any evidence of human military expansion, but we also haven't been able to accurately assess their total military capabilities. Their stealth technology appears to be essentially perfect according to our current detection methods. She highlighted specific sections of the display that showed the locations of known human diplomatic missions. What we can confirm is that humanity has established a presence in key strategic locations throughout Imperial space, always with the stated purpose of providing humanitarian or technological assistance. However, the pattern of their deployments suggests sophisticated strategic planning. Fleet Admiral Thescaron studied the tactical display with the practiced eye of someone who had spent centuries analyzing potential threats to Imperial security. The distribution of human activities showed a level of strategic sophistication that rivaled Imperial planning, but with objectives that remained unclear. What are humanity's stated long-term objectives? Have they provided any information about their ultimate intentions regarding the Empire? They've been remarkably consistent in their communications, Fleet Admiral. They claim to want peaceful coexistence with the Empire while maintaining their independence and the right to share their technology with other species. They've repeatedly stated that they have no interest in conquest or political domination. Intelligence Director Colthera's expression shifted to the skeptical pattern that typically accompanied her analysis of potentially deceptive communications. In your professional assessment, Admiral, do you believe human statements about their peaceful intentions are genuine? The question forced Vextera to confront the central puzzle that had dominated her thinking for the past 3 months. Everything about human behavior suggested genuinely peaceful intentions, yet their technological capabilities and strategic positioning created potential threats to Imperial authority that couldn't be ignored. Director, based on my direct interactions with human leadership, I believe their stated intentions are genuine. They appear to be genuinely committed to peaceful coexistence. However, their definition of peaceful coexistence includes activities that fundamentally challenge Imperial authority over technological development and member species relations. The distinction was crucial. Humanity wasn't necessarily seeking conflict with the Empire, but they were pursuing objectives that would inevitably result in conflict unless the Empire was willing to accept fundamental changes to its governing philosophy. For a civilization that had maintained absolute authority for 3 millennia, such changes represented an existential challenge. Strategic analyst Vec Moran completed his historical analysis and shared his conclusions with the assembled leadership. Based on comprehensive analysis of similar situations throughout galactic history, I can identify no historical precedent for the current circumstances. Every previous encounter between the Empire and technologically advanced species has resulted in either Imperial victory through military superiority or negotiated integration based on clear power imbalances. Humanity represents the first case of a species that appears to possess technological capabilities comparable to or exceeding Imperial systems while maintaining genuinely independent objectives. The admission that their situation was historically unprecedented sent another wave of unease through the chamber. Imperial strategy had always been based on the assumption that superior technology and strategic planning would allow them to manage any potential threat. The possibility that they were facing a challenge that couldn't be resolved through traditional means was deeply disturbing. Fleet Admiral Thescaron rose from his seat and moved to examine the tactical display more closely. Admiral Vextera, in your professional military assessment, What would be the likely outcome if diplomatic relations with humanity deteriorated into military conflict? The question that Vexthera had been dreading throughout the briefing. Her tactical analysis had forced her to confront the possibility that the Empire might not emerge victorious from a conflict with humanity, a conclusion that challenged everything she had believed about Imperial superiority. Fleet Admiral, based on observed human capabilities, I believe the outcome of military conflict would be highly uncertain. Human vessels demonstrate maneuverability and defensive capabilities that exceed our current tactical doctrine. More significantly, their apparent ability to operate multiple fleets while maintaining perfect stealth suggests that we might be facing military capabilities far beyond what they've chosen to reveal. She paused, gathering her thoughts before delivering the most difficult part of her assessment. Additionally, human technological assistance to member species has created political complications that could affect imperial unity during any potential conflict. Several worlds that have benefited from human technology might be reluctant to support military action against their benefactors. The implications were staggering. Not only did humanity possess military capabilities that could challenge imperial forces directly, but their diplomatic approach had created political divisions within the empire that could be exploited during any future conflict. They had managed to achieve a strategic position that would have required decades of careful planning and execution. Intelligence Director Kolthera accessed additional data files and shared her analysis with the group. Our intelligence gathering regarding human home systems has been largely unsuccessful due to their stealth capabilities. However, we've managed to gather some information about their technological development timeline that raises additional concerns. The display shifted to show a chronological analysis of human technological advancement based on the limited information Imperial intelligence had been able to gather. According to our best estimates, humanity achieved interstellar travel capabilities approximately 7 years ago. However, the sophistication of their current technology suggests development periods that should have required centuries of advancement. Senior Technician Mordun, who had accompanied Vexthera during the initial contact and had spent the intervening months attempting to understand human technology, finally spoke. Directors, I believe humanity may have achieved technological advancement through methods that don't conform to conventional development patterns. Their approach to engineering problems appears to be fundamentally different from anything we've encountered. Could you elaborate on that assessment, Technician? Certainly, Fleet Admiral. Traditional technological development follows predictable patterns of incremental improvement based on accumulated knowledge and experience. Humanity appears to have bypassed these incremental stages through breakthrough discoveries that allowed them to leap directly to advanced capabilities. It's as though they've developed an entirely different approach to scientific research that yields results at accelerated rates. The conversation continued for several more hours, with various specialists and analysts contributing their perspectives on the human situation. However, the fundamental conclusion remained unchanged. Humanity represented a challenge to imperial authority that couldn't be resolved through traditional means. As the briefing concluded, Fleet Admiral Thescaron summarized the situation with characteristic directness. The consensus appears to be that humanity possesses both the technological capability and strategic sophistication to challenge imperial authority if they choose to do so. However, their current actions suggest they prefer cooperative relationships to military conflict. The question that remains is whether the Empire can adapt to coexistence with an independent species of comparable capabilities. The question hung in the air as the assembled leadership considered their options. For 3,000 years, the Kethmoran Empire had maintained galactic peace through the simple expedient of superior force. They had never been required to negotiate with equals or accommodate independent species with comparable capabilities. Admiral Vexthera realized that she was witnessing the end of an era. The galaxy was entering a new phase of political evolution, one in which the Empire would be required to share influence with other powers. Whether that transition would be peaceful or violent would depend largely on the Empire's willingness to accept the new reality that humanity had created. As she left the high command chambers, Vexthera reflected on the irony of the situation. Humanity had achieved what countless other species had attempted throughout galactic history. They had forced the Empire to acknowledge them as equals. But rather than doing so through conquest or destruction, they had accomplished it through technological innovation and diplomatic sophistication. The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps that was exactly what humanity had intended from the beginning. They had looked at the established order of galactic civilization and decided to change it, not through force, but through the simple expedient of demonstrating that alternative approaches were possible. In the end, the most revolutionary thing about humanity wasn't their impossible technology or their strategic brilliance. It was their willingness to believe that the universe could be better than it was, and their determination to make that belief a reality. For a species that had always been told that certain things were impossible, they had shown remarkable talent for proving otherwise. The age of imperial dominance was over. The age of galactic cooperation was about to begin, and Admiral Vextera suspected that humanity was just getting started.